بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي إن شاء الله جزاكم الله خير السلام عليكم ورحمة الله for joining us once again on another episode of our series on the Quran in the month of Ramadan. So, in this section, inshallah, we'll be speaking about some of the etiquettes that are incumbent upon the student to have, so the student of the Quran, for them to embody or for them to abide by, especially considering the fact that they are going to be learning the most important or they are engaging in the most important type of education available, which is the Quranic education. So the author he says, جميع ما ذكرناه من آداب المعلم في نفسه آداب للمتعلم. So the author he says everything that we've already mentioned regarding the etiquettes of the teacher is also considered to be etiquettes that should be upheld by the student also. So everything that we already mentioned in previous episodes regarding how a teacher should be, this is also applicable to the student. And Imam An-Nawawi expands now, he's going to expand on some of those etiquettes that are desired from the student. So he says, وَمِنْ آدَابِهِ, from amongst the etiquettes that a student should always have and possess, أن يجتنب الأسباب الشاغلة عن التحصيل. They should always avoid any distractions that would prevent them from attaining their objective. So often what happens is, unfortunately, is that whenever we set out to learn anything, so whenever we will go into any type of education, sometimes one of the reasons why we fail, or one of the reasons why we fall short, is because of the fact that we get very easily distracted from why we're there in the first place. And sometimes many of these institutes of education sometimes cultivate a place, or they cultivate an environment that's not conducive whatsoever to the education. So instead of it being about the education, people go to universities nowadays for many other reasons. However, the author is saying the number one, the most important, one of the most important etiquettes is to remove yourself and to prevent yourself from being distracted from anything that would ultimately derail you from your course, or from from that which your objective is, which is to learn the education, to learn the Quran, for example. So anything that may distract you from that is something that you should always avoid. Nowadays, one of the things that we can all almost unanimously agree upon is that one of the most distractive devices that we carry around are our phones. This is probably going to be something that every single person can relate to. That sometimes it's very easy to be distracted, especially when we carry our phones or with us all the time. Sometimes what happens is we very easily become distracted, even in the classroom. This applies to teachers and students. So a person should always try and avoid that as much. Anything, not just the phone, but anything that may bring about or may reduce the focus that the teacher has or the student has. In this case, the student. So anything that may cause the student to become distracted should be avoided. The author then he says, إلا سببا لا بد منه للحاجة, unless there's something, or unless there's a reason as to why, in which therefore it is a necessity. So if there's a necessity in which the student has to, for whatever reason, has to distract him or herself from the class, or from learning, or from in the presence of their teacher, then if it's something that's unavoidable, if it's something that's a necessity, then that's an exception to the rule. The other then he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يُطَهِّرَ قَلْبَهُ مِنَ الْأَدْنَاسِ, and it's incumbent that the student removes any spiritual ailments from, or any spiritual ailment from their hearts. So they should purify their hearts from all deficiency, sin, iniquity, and anything that will cause this person's heart not to be able to accept the Quran. Okay, or not be able to communicate with the Quran. It's very important for a person's heart to be accepting, for a person's heart to be cultivated, so that they can absorb and they can learn the revelation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, "Inna sanulqi alayka qawlan thaqila." We are going to send and cause to descend upon you, or will give to you a weighty revelation. So the revelation is very heavy. It's not something which is light. The author then he says, لِيَصْلَحَ لِقَبُولِ الْقُرْآنِ وَحِفْظِهِ, in order to accept the Quran. This is, the heart should be purified from all iniquity and from spiritual impurities, so that it can accept the Quran, its memorization and its fruits and its benefits. فقد صح, the author says, فقد صح عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال, it's been established that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, he said, ألا إن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت. It can be made in many ways, صلحت or صلحت. So both types of languages is acceptable to say. So it could be pronounced as صلحت or صلحت. So إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله. The Prophet said, وإذا فسدت أو فسدت فسد الجسد كله أو فسد الجسد كله. رواه ألا وهي القلب. So this hadith or this prophetic tradition states what the Prophet he said, ألا فإن في الجسد مضغة. There's a piece of, or there's a morsel in the body. If this morsel is rectified and if it's sound, then the entire body is sound. And if it's corrupted, the entire body is corrupted. ألا وهي القلب, indeed it's the heart. He said عليه الصلاة والسلام, and it's a hadith which is متفق عليه. And then Imam al-Nawawi, he said, وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ الْقَائِلُ, and whoever said, meaning this, what a beautiful statement or saying it is, the saying in which somebody said, يُطَيَّبُ الْقَلْبُ لِلْعِلْمِ كَمَا تُطَيَّبُ الْأَرْضُ لِلزَّرَاعَةِ. So it's a saying in which it states, يُطَيَّبُ الْقَلْبُ لِلْعِلْمِ. The heart is purified for knowledge in the exact same way that the earth is purified for agriculture. So in the exact same way in which a person clears the earth, okay, for agricultural reasons, agricultural purpose to farm, similarly the heart is also cultivated in order to accept the knowledge. The author then he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَتَوَاضَعَ لِمُعَلِّمِهِ وَيَتَأَدَّبَ مَعَهُ وَإِنْ كَانَ أَصْغَرَ مِنْهُ سِنًّا. So the author says, it's also very important that the student is very humble to his or her teacher, and that they display the best etiquettes with them, even if the teacher is younger than them in age. So imagine if the teacher is younger than you in age, even then the student should always give and always afford that level of respect and always display the best courtesy, manners and etiquettes towards their teacher, even if the teacher is younger. The author says, وَأَقَلَّ شُهْرَةً وَنَسَبًا وَصَلَاحًا. Even if the teacher is considered to be less than the student in terms of fame, in terms of lineage, meaning less known in lineage, or some different people are respected for different reasons. One of the reasons when people are afforded a huge level of respect is because they come from a certain family. So if your family, if the student's family is much more well known than the teachers, that shouldn't be an issue as to why the student should still not be humble. The student should still be humble to the teacher. وَنَسَبًا. So even if the teacher comes from a less well-known family, for example. وَصَلَاحًا. Even if the teacher is less than the student in terms of piety, righteousness, because although righteousness is extremely important, really an extremely important attribute for a teacher to possess, there are varying levels. Sometimes the student could excel the teacher in terms of righteousness. Even if that's the case, that shouldn't prevent the student from being humble and respecting the teacher for the mere fact that he or she is their teacher. وغير ذلك, and the author says, and there are other examples that can also be given. The author then he says, وَيَتَوَاضَعَ لِلْعِلْمِ, and the student should be humble in relation to the knowledge itself. So even the knowledge itself, the student should be humble towards the knowledge. And then he says, Imam al-Nawawi, فَبِتَوَاضُعِهِ لِلْعِلْمِ يُدْرِكُهُ, by virtue of the student's humbleness towards the knowledge and respect towards the knowledge, he or she will reach the attainment of that knowledge. وَقَدْ قَالُوا, and it's been said, so in lines of poetry, الْعِلْمُ حَرْبٌ لِلْفَتَى الْمُتَعَالِي كَالسَّيْلِ حَرْبٌ لِلْمَكَانِ الْعَالِي. So some lines of poetry. I know we also mentioned these lines of poetry in his Majmu', in which it states, العلم حرب للفتى المتعالي, or للمتعالي, which is knowledge is in a state of conflict to the young person who is extremely haughty. كالسيل حرب للمكان العالي, like the deluge or a flood is in conflict with an elevated place. So I mean, if there's a huge flood, it doesn't really care whether if it's on a plateau, if it's in a valley, or if it's in a high place, it will sweep everything. Okay, so even the high place, or a place where is considered to be a highland area, that can be penetrated by a huge flood. So just in the exact same way that the flood or a deluge can even occupy the higher and the more of a highland area, in the exact same way knowledge is in conflict with somebody who is haughty and high in their character. Okay, so somebody who expresses a level of arrogance. Okay, that kind of person, knowledge doesn't really. That kind of person is adverse to knowledge. So knowledge is adverse to that kind of person. Okay, so it's something to consider. It's a beautiful line of poetry, where there is much in which we can benefit. Though then he says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَنْقَادَ لِمُعَلِّمِهِ, it's important for the student to know his or her level in relation to their teacher. So meaning, أَنْ يَنْقَاد means that you submit to your teacher because they're your teacher. That's what there's a clear, defined relationship between the teacher and the student. Okay, the student and the teacher aren't meant to be friends. That's not the point of having a teacher. The teacher isn't supposed to have a good relationship with the teacher, to be to have a level of mutual courtesy is something which is very good and very important, and the level of respect should be there between the teacher and the student. However, the teacher is the teacher and the student is the student, and that needs to be known. Those boundaries need to be very clear. So the student is there to learn from the teacher. Therefore, there's a greater level of respect that needs to be afforded to the teacher. وَيَنْبَغِي, especially from the student. So وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَنْقَادَ لِمُعَلِّمِهِ. It's essential that the student, understands their relationship towards the teacher. And yanqad means when you accept and you've submitted. So the teacher should symbolically even should submit to their teacher. وَيُشَاوِرُهُ فِي أُمُورِهِ, and the student should always seek counsel with his or her teacher. وَيَقْبَلَ قَوْلَهُ, and they should accept accept the advice that's given by their teacher, or they should expect, or they should accept that which their teacher informs them. كالمريض العاقل يقبل قول الطبيب الناصح الحاذق وهذا أولى. Imam Nawawi, he says, in the exact same way, like somebody who has sound intellect but is ill, physically ill, would accept the statement of their doctor, who it would be a nasih al-hadiq, a doctor who is sincere in their advice towards their patient, and al-hadiq, and somebody who is very clever. وهذا أولى, and the author says this takes precedence. So this is your teacher. This is even more important, because what your teacher is teaching you is something which is even beyond the worldly sciences, dealing with revelation, nature of revelation, the Quran, the afterlife, the akhirah. It's very important then for it to be seen in that way. The author then, he says, وَلَا يَتَعَلَّمُ إِلَّا مِمَّنْ كَمُلَتْ أَهْلِيَتُهُ. So speaking about the qualities of the teacher and the student, who should the student learn from? The author says, وَلَا يَتَعَلَّمُ إِلَّا مِمَّنْ كَمُلَتْ أَهْلِيَتُهُ. The student shouldn't learn the Quran except from somebody whose qualities are known, somebody who has perfected, okay, their status and their qualities in relation to that which they're teaching. And the reason why the author, he mentions it, I mean, nowadays this might be very difficult. All of these points that are being mentioned here might not necessarily be easily ascertained or known, and that's something which is a fair point, because in the past there was really abundance, to choose from, but nowadays it's kind of really very difficult to ascertain almost all of these things. And the author says, وَظَهَرَتْ دِيَانَتُهُ, and a person whose religiosity has become manifest. So this is not somebody who's a obscure figure, somebody who's well known, somebody who's has some level of some as a status. This is important in a way, because then people can vouch for this person. Or then he says, وَتَحَقَّقَتْ مَعْرِفَتُهُ, and their level of knowledge is something that has been confirmed. So وَتَحَقَّقَتْ مَعْرِفَتُهُ, meaning they have a deep and an in-depth level of understanding. وَاشْتَهَرَتْ صِيَانَتُهُ, and this person's level of abstinence is also become very well known. فَقَدْ قَالَ مُحَمَّدْ ibn Sirin, because it was said, so it is a statement that's attributed to Muhammad ibn Sirin, وَمَالِكْ ibn Anas, وَغَيْرُهُمَا, and other and others also from the early Muslims, من السلف. هذا العلم دين فانظروا عمن تأخذون دينكم. This famous statement is mentioned in Sahih Muslim. In his Muqaddimah, Imam Muslim mentions it in his Muqaddimah. Abu Nu'aym mentions it in his book Hilyatul Awliya. Al-Khatib al-Ghazali mentions it in his book Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih. And Muhammad ibn Sirin, and also Al-Khatib mentions in his book Al-Faqih wal-Mutafaqih. And Ibn Abdul Barr mentions it in his Tamheed on the authority of Imam Malik. So, which is هذا العلم دين. This knowledge is the religion. So look from whom you take and you acquire your religion. Now he continues and he says, وَعَلَيْهِ أَن يَنْظُرَ مُعَلِّمَهُ بِعَيْنِ الْإِحْتِرَامِ. It's incumbent that the student, when he or she looks at their teacher, is done, they look at them with respect. So there should be a level of, they should have that respect for their teacher. Okay, so when they look at their teacher, they look at them, with a level of respect. وَيَعْتَقِدَ كَمَالَ أَهْلِيَتِهِ وَرُجْحَانَهُ عَلَى طَبَقَتِهِ. And also that they should believe, because in order to be able to benefit from your teacher, you have to be able to acknowledge and recognize their level of expertise. So you have to believe in the fact that what they are telling you and what they are teaching you is important for you to understand and to acknowledge and to believe that what they are telling you is correct. Otherwise, they wouldn't be your teacher. Why? Because the author says, فَإِنَّهُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَى انْتِفَاعِهِ بِهِ, because that would be more closer for you to be able to attain a benefit. So it's close. You would only be able to truly benefit from your teacher if you know and if you believe what they're telling you is actually genuine and it's actually true. And then he says, وَكَانَ بَعْضُ الْمُتَقَدِّمِينَ, and some of the early scholars, إِذَا ذَهَبَ, meaning some of the early students of knowledge, إِذَا ذَهَبَ إِلَى مُعَلِّمِهِ, when they would go to their teacher. Obviously this doesn't happen nowadays, but in the early days, in some of the early Muslims, when some of the students would go to a teacher, تصدق بشيء, they would give a type of charity, not necessarily to the teacher, but they would give a charity before they actually they would give something in charity before they would attend, and they would make a supplication, and they would say, وَقَالَ اللَّهُمَّ اسْتُرْ عَيْبَ مُعَلِّمِي عَنِّي, which is, they would say, "Oh Allah, God Almighty, cover the deficiency of my teacher from me," because we're all human beings, everybody has deficiencies. So they would make a dua and they would say, "Oh Allah, cover the deficiencies of my teacher from me." Why? In order to keep that level of respect. And وَلَا تُذْهِبَ بَرَكَةَ عِلْمِهِ مِنِّي, and oh Allah, do not remove and cause to be lost the blessings of his or her knowledge from me. Okay, it's a beautiful dua. So they would make this dua, they would give some charity, say something in charity, and they would pray before they attend the classes, and they would say, "Oh Allah, cover the iniquities or cover the deficiencies of my teacher from me, and oh Allah, do not cause to be lost the blessings of their knowledge from me." And then the author, he says, وَقَالَ الرَّبِيعُ صَاحِبُ, showing you the level of respect that the student should have for the teacher. And the author, he says, وَقَالَ الرَّبِيعُ صَاحِبُ الشَّافِعِيَّ رَحِمَهُمُ اللَّهُ ta'ala. So Ar-Rabi' was one of the students of Imam al-Shafi'i, and he spent many years with Imam al-Shafi'i. And look what he says. He said, مَجْتَرَأْتُ أَنْ أَشْرَبَ الْمَاءَ وَالشَّافِعِيُّ يَنْظُرُ إِلَيَّ حَيْبَةً لَهُ. And this is mentioned by Al-Bayhaqi in his book Al-Madkhal, in which Al-Rabi' said, "It never once occurred to me to drink water whilst Imam Shafi'i was looking at me, out of respect out of awe and respect that I had for him. I've never in my life drank water in front of him." Imagine, subhanallah. For us, we would consider that to be something minor. We wouldn't even consider that to be a big deal. But out of the all respect and admiration and love that these people had for their teachers, they wouldn't even do anything that would remotely be interpreted as being disrespectful. And obviously, he was doing this out of respect and admiration for his teacher. He would never drink a glass of water in front of his teacher, because I've never even thought of, forget even doing it. It never has occurred to me to drink a glass of water, and my teacher, Imam Shafi'i, is looking at me out of admiration and respect that I have for him. Imagine. The author then he says, وروينا عن أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب رضي الله عنه. So this narration is narrated by Ali bin Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen رضي الله عنه, قال, in which he said, من حق العالم عليك أن تسلم على الناس عامة وتخصه دونهم بالتحية. It's a very interesting statement. Ali ibn Abi Talib, he said, and it's longer, so we're going to continue, it's quite a long statement. He said, it's a long saying rather, من حق العالم عليك. He goes, from the rights that a teacher or somebody knowledgeable, okay, has upon you, is that you greet everybody, the people, generally you give them a universal greeting, but you specifically give the one who has knowledge, or the knowledgeable one, or the learned person, the scholarly person, you specify that person with a greeting. So you go to a gathering with many people, you say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah to everybody, and when you see your teacher, you give your teacher a specific and more pronounced greeting that's particular for him or for her, out of respect and admiration. So That's what Ali ibn Abi Talib he said. Then he continues and he says, وَأَن تَجْلِسَ أَمَامَهُ, and you should sit in front of him or her. وَلَا تُشِيرَنَّ عِنْدَهُ بِيَدِكَ, and do not point your hand in front of him. وَلَا تَغْمِزَنَّ بِعَيْنَيْكَ, and do not wander your eyes and look, do a play with the eyes. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ قَالَ فُلَانٌ خِلَافًا لِقَوْلِهِ, and never say so and so said from the scholars in a way in which, or with the intention to debunk or to repudiate or to refute what the teacher said, because that's very disrespectful. When a teacher says something and the student says, oh, but so and so said, okay, so Imam Nawawi is saying never do that in front of your teacher. وَلَا تَقُولَنَّ قَالَ فُلَانٌ, never say so and so said, with the intention, to go against that which the teacher said or the scholarly person whom you are in their company. وَلَا تَغْتَابَنَّ عِنْدَهُ أَحَدًا, and do not backbite anybody in his or her presence. وَلَا تُسَارِرْ فِي مَجْلِسِهِ وَلَا تَأْخُذْ بِثَوْبِهِ, never grab onto your teacher's clothes, ever. وَلَا تُلِحَّ عَلَيْهِ إِذَا كَسِلْ, and do not annoy do not annoy him or her if they are tired, if they become tired. Do not annoy them, keep on asking them, especially if they said, for example, that's enough for today, as an example. وَلَا تُعْرِضْ أي لا تشبع من طول صحبته, and never become lazy or tired from accompanying them, meaning having them as teachers for a long period of time. طول صحبة. طول صحبة means that you are with this person for a long time, okay, to benefit from them and from their knowledge. And by the way, this is the type of education that's very rarely found nowadays. If it's probably in many places almost unheard of, and in other places dying out. Okay, so this was a kind of a norm that existed in the Muslim world, in which there was an important relationship between the teacher and the student, to the point in which it wasn't like it is today, where you go to an institution or to a school or to a university or whatever, and the relationship between the student and the teacher is only in relation to the institute itself. But it was more than that. And that's something that doesn't really exist today, or it's dying out rapidly if it hasn't died out already. So the author is saying here, never be full, do not ever become full, and do not ever turn away from having that relationship with your teacher long term. So having a long-term relationship with your teacher in which you can benefit from them. That's how you gain knowledge. So knowledge is a journey. So it's not something that lasts for 1 month or 2 months or 6 months or a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 or 10. Knowledge is something that goes on and on and on. The author says, وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ يَتَأَدَّبَ بِهَذِهِ الْخِصَالِ الَّتِي أَرْشَدَ إِلَيْهَا عَلِيٌّ كَرَّمَ اللَّهُ وَجْهَهُ. He says it's essential that the student adopts these characteristics, that which was mentioned by Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah honor his face. وَأَنْ يَرُدَّ غِيبَةَ شَيْخِهِ إِنْ قَدَرَ. And if anybody, Imam Nawawi adds, if anybody is disrespectful and backbites this person's teacher, they should always defend their teacher. So if the person's teacher is being attacked, a person should respectfully defend their teacher. فَإِن تَعَذَّرَ عَلَيْهِ رَدُّهَا. But if they're in a situation or in a circumstance in which they do not have the ability to be able to defend their teacher, فَارَقَ ذَلِكَ الْمَجْلِسِ. The student then should leave that gathering. Okay? The student, in those circumstances, the student shouldn't be present in a place where their teacher is being disrespected. This is just pure, just etiquettes. and it's very important for us to embody these etiquettes, and for us to perfect them as much as we can. Jazakumullah khair for joining us in this segment. Inshallah, we will continue tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa